you too.
All right. So starting with the four immeasurable thoughts. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from desire for friends and hatred for enemies. And then refuge in bodhicitta. Sanghe churan sogi chunamla janchu parudani kapsuchi dagi chanyangi pesonamgi rola penche sanghe rupasho sanghe churan sogi chunamla janchu parudani kapsuchi dagi chanyangi pesonamgi Drola penche sange drupa sho sange juram sogi chunama jancho parudani kapsuchi dagi chunyengi pesonamgi drola penche sange drupa sho. And just letting that motivation connect and stabilize. All right, so today we're going to look at Tonglen specifically, because quite a few of the verses directly or indirectly invite the practice of Tonglen. So of the folks here today, how many have never done any Tonglen in any form? Is there anybody totally new to this practice? Couple? Yep, and then yeah, no, that's good because that means I'll start from the beginning and then those of you that are experts will fill in any gaps. Okay, so Tonglen is Tibetan words for giving and taking and giving. And what are you taking and what are you giving? And what are you taking it to and what are you giving from? These are the important questions before we do the actual practice. But in the context of the Wheel of Sharp Weapons, they're very provocative statements. And so I'll just kind of show you what we're talking about and where we're framing all of this and then see what questions you have before we do the meditation. So just reviewing very briefly the main themes. We've got peacocks, which are in the text everywhere, which are analogous to beings who can use hardship and temptation on the path to enlightenment. So bodhisattvas. Then we've got poison, analogous to the danger of living in a samsaric environment and having samsaric views. We've got crows, analogous to cowardly beings motivated by self-cherishing and self-grasping. We've got the Wheel of Sharp Weapons itself, analogous to karma, our current experience being directly related to our past actions. And Yama and Yamantaka, the Lord of Death being karma and disturbing emotions, and the Slayer of the Lord of Death being wisdom. So those are the main themes. They'll keep coming up, and we went through them in detail in the previous session, so we'll just keep moving. Okay. So last time we did this meditation up to point 4, and what we didn't do was point 5, but point 5 is related to what came before it. So in the meditation, you were invited to equalize self and others first. And the way that you equalize self and others is to really use logic and experience to consider the way people and all sentient beings are equal. They're equal in wanting happiness, not wanting suffering. That's our go-to, right? They want happiness, they don't want suffering. And, you know, their strategies for getting happiness and suffering could be flawed, could be skillful. Their ways of getting happiness and avoiding suffering might be common or unusual, but the baseline is the same. right? They just want to be happy, don't want to suffer. That's what drives all sentient beings. But other ways that they're equal is that we are all having a mind that has the nature of clarity and awareness, that reflects, that has the ability to cognize. And this mind lacks inherent existence, which means it can transform. And this is our Buddha nature. This is the really good news. The bad news is that we also have innate ignorance, which is what colors all of our ways of viewing the world at this stage in our development. There's a veil or a concealment or a seeming of intrinsic existence to all people, places, things, scenarios, and that simply isn't the case. So the good news, the bad news, the neutral news, that is equal for all sentient beings. The rest is details. So you have to kind of start there with kind of getting some equalizing ideas, getting everyone a feeling of the same footing. And then from that place, you can really start looking at ratios and proportions of how much time you spend focused on yourself as opposed to focused on other sentient beings. And you see very quickly that the proportion is really skewed. And then it's not that you don't need to look after yourself, it's that how much time is really needed. How much time is needed to do a good job taking care of this sentient being that you're responsible for? And how much time could be freed up looking after the welfare of sentient beings? And the way you do that might be to work on your mind more, but it's with the goal of working on it in order to benefit others. Right. So it's not about like you're only allowed one day, 1 hour a day inside and the rest of the time has to be outside. It's not so simplistic. It's not, oh, I can only think of my food and my sleep and my clothing. And once I've done those basic needs, I'm not allowed to ever think of myself at all, ever. Don't get too literal, don't get too simplistic. But the idea is that when you have a narrow focus, when you have the self-cherishing mind really activated, that everything becomes sort of tunnel vision and everything becomes about you. Terrible things are your fault. Good things are because you deserve them. You're the main character of everything. It's all drama all the time when you're only thinking of yourself. When you're thinking of others, there's a spaciousness and a relaxing and an ability to be creative and playful and explore life much differently. So what's really being asked of us in this meditation is to expand the focus, which includes you, but not just you. And that actually becomes a great relief, even if at first there's resistance. So the way you do that, you start with equalizing, and then you gradually think, what are the disadvantages of self-cherishing? So when we did that meditation last week, or when we did the class, did you come up with any gems? Disadvantages of self-cherishing? What happens when you're in that mindset? What happens to your everyday life? What happens in your relationships? Or what happens in the world when self-cherishing, this self-centered attitude that's indifferent to others, is driving? What happens to you?
I would say that it makes you like a little bit oversensitive because you're at the center of everything. So everything is just in relation to you.
Yeah. Oversensitive is a classic. That's a classic symptom. Absolutely. Yeah, you get a bit fragile. Yeah, you get a little bit, yeah, that's a really good sign that you have flagged your self-cherishing. Yeah, or someone else is self-cherishing, right? When they're getting really hypersensitive and they're really fragile, it's a terrible suffering and you want to offer so much compassion, but know your own experience of when you're that guy, when you're like that. Yeah, when you're really fragile and self-conscious and hypersensitive, it's coming from a place of excessive self-focus. Not something to say to someone who's depressed, right? Don't say that to someone who's depressed unless they've got mental space to hear you and to play with it. But if they already have the mental space to hear you, they're on their way to healing already. Yeah, so lots of things can help them get further. But when you're really in it, it's a trap and you're stuck. And you need a lot of warmth and care to move out of that into an expanded focus. You know, a lot of you know that I used to work in Israel with people that were training to be psychoanalysts, and their definition of good mental health was that your empathy increases. And I thought that was a beautiful definition. A sign of good mental health is when your empathy increases. And so if someone's really struggling, it's to be expected that they'll be self-absorbed. Yeah, it's to be expected. And when we are suffering, it's expected that we'll be self-absorbed. But if we can peel back a few layers of that and realize that that self-absorption is both a cause and a symptom, both. So can we get rid of some of the causes and you'll relieve a lot of the symptoms? Yeah, so looking at the disadvantages, you need to be a little bit objective, or else you can get into self-loathing or self-punishment, or flip the switch and start really judging everybody and getting really critical. Yeah, of you don't know how much I suffer and I still stay polite and competent. You're only suffering a little. Why can't you get on with it? You know, you can get really judgmental. So you have to approach this carefully when you're looking at the disadvantages of self-cherishing. Think about what it does to you. So when you're in just absolute self-absorption, your body can get weird. You can get really tight. You can get really stressed. You can hold your jaw and lock your jaw. You can get really furrowed brow. You can do the lockdown, or you might get really floppy and really couch potato, like can't get any. And really think about like what does it do to you when self-cherishing is up? First, just look at the physical symptom, really floppy and low energy. You can think, what happens to my speech? When I'm self-cherishing, when I'm really self-absorbed, do I get really blunt? Do I get sharp with people? Or do I get really speedy and domineering and I info dump and I flood them with words and I try and dominate them that way? Do I give them the silent treatment? It's not about finding of when that particular negative situation is up. What does it look like for you as an individual? Because we're all so different. You can't say it always looks this way, but how does it look for you? So verbally, you might get more.
It's like we lost her. Give her a minute to come back. Ah, there she is.
Oh, we're back.
Back.
Okay, sorry guys. The internet just dropped. I don't know why. I'm in the middle of Portland. It should be excellent, but it's not.
Oh, well,
Excuse me.
welcome back.
So we were talking about the disadvantages of self-cherishing and how that was one of the points in the meditation lab. We talked physically and verbally. Now mentally, what happens to you when self-cherishing is driving? Can you guys hear me okay? Is the internet stable enough? Yeah. Yeah. What happens? Do you go?
Yeah, I came to think
Yeah,
about this.
please.
I uh I think
Yeah,
like
go ahead, Leo.
yeah, I feel like I either feel below other people, like I have this feeling, or above,
Mm.
or like in a way of competing, you know what I mean? Like when I'm equal, when I feel like the same or
Yeah.
equal to the other, I have this feeling of competition, and then if not, I'm feeling like above him, that like I'm better than him, and if not, I feel below him, and then it's just uncomfortable, and it's like a way of limiting yourself, it's so uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you guys still hear me? Somehow all of your videos have gone.
Yeah, we can hear you. You're fading in and out. Your picture kind of gets wonky at times.
Okay, I'm gonna see if a different part of campus will work better, just in case.
Okay.
So you're gonna have a tour. We have a tour of Maitripa College and see if I can find better Wi-Fi. Let's see. Hey, let's see, is this getting better?
It's a beautiful campus. Makes me want to come visit.
To visit, but obviously our Wi-Fi is not great. Let's see. Where shall I sit? Oh, look, it looks like I've got more bars. That's a good sign. Okay. How's that, everybody? Is that better?
Well, it looks good. We'll see what happens.
Okay. Okay. Apologies. Oh, I see you coming back. That's a good sign. All right. All right. We're here. We are here. All right. So, then when we identify the advantages of cherishing others, this can be, I don't know, a little embarrassing. It can be a little not exactly what we want to do because it feels like, I don't know, like you're pumping yourself up too much. But what you're really doing is to think, do you know what, when I'm thinking of others, not in a giving advice or fixing way, not in a, trying to get them to like me way, but in a really open-hearted way, I am relaxed. I am more skillful with my speech. I make fewer mistakes. My mind is happy. It benefits me to think of them. And then you go further and you think, how does it affect them? They get the best of me. They get the most centered version. They get the warmest version. And then that has a ripple effect. The choices I make have better long-term impact. It really benefits the people in your life to have that big picture attitude. So meditation like this is really, think of what we're talking about, like identify it in terms of the teaching, but then immediately make it personal. Yeah, immediately make it personal. And then you decide, which you already decided, but you decide from a more genuine place. I'm going to exchange self in the sense of self-cherishing for others, in the sense of cherishing others. And the way I'm going to do that is through right in real time on this cushion at this time, practice Tonglen. So those first four, did they make sense to you, those first four? Yeah, before we get to Tonglen? And do you have any questions about those ones? Good. Good, good. Okay. Self-cherishing, thumbs down. Okay, good. Cherishing others, thumbs up. Easy. All right. So then Tonglen, the verses are, there are a lot of verses, but one of them is verse 7. Uncontrollable wandering through rounds of existence is caused by our grasping at egos as real. This ignorant attitude heralds the demon of self-concern for our welfare alone. We seek some security for our own egos. We want only pleasure and shun any pain. But now we must banish all selfish compulsion and gladly take hardship for all others' sake. Take, what does that mean? So then all of our suffering derive from our habits of selfish delusion we heed and act out. As all of us share in this tragic misfortune, which stems from our narrow and self-centered ways, we must take all our sufferings and the miseries of others and smother our wishes of selfish concern. So we're not to think I should suppress or deny my emotions. Yeah, not that. And we should not think I should accept bad behavior from others. Okay, that's not what's being asked. When we continue with these verses, we have 94, it says, with all of the sufferings that others experience, smother completely our selfish concern. The sufferings of others arise from 5 poisons. Thus, whichever delusion afflicts other beings, take it to smother delusions of self. So then what to think is, I can use the suffering, delusions, and bad behaviors of others as a means to overcome my own delusions. This will actually help me to prevent my future bad behavior and suffering. Okay, so therefore practice Tonglen. So what you're going to do is imagine taking on the results of having lived under the influence of self-cherishing and self-grasping. The results are suffering. So you're taking on suffering, and then you're giving happiness and the roots of virtue to all sentient beings, the results of your positive attitudes of cherishing others. So it's counterintuitive, and you don't need to get too literal with it or feel anything other than the way your mind doesn't want to do this. It doesn't want to take on suffering. It doesn't want to give happiness. That is something interesting to play with. So we'll just experiment with it, and then we'll unpack what you guys think about it. All right, so if you want to get yourself a nice meditation posture, I'm just going to close the door so I don't annoy my coworkers. Get yourself a nice meditation posture. Okay. And so just being in the body, being present with your physical experience, grounding yourself just by awareness of what the body experience is like right now. And then gradually bring your focus to the breath. But as you focus on the breath, don't try to change it or alter it. If you're having a shallow breath, you simply know that. If you're breathing deeply, you simply know that. Just be with the knowing of the physical experience of breathing. Breathing in, you know that you're breathing in. Breathing out, you know that you're breathing out. Just let these sensations hold your attention. And now, as you watch the breath, add a very simple thought to the awareness of your breath. Add the thought, may all beings be free of suffering on the in-breath, and may all beings have happiness on the out-breath. Or simply, in-breath compassion, out-breath love. See if you can tie those two concepts to the awareness of the breath. Starting there. In-breath compassion, out-breath love. In-breath, may all beings be free of suffering. Out-breath, may all beings have happiness. And then layer in the thought, on the in-breath, may all beings be free of suffering. Therefore, may I take their suffering. On the out-breath, may all beings have happiness. Therefore, may I give them happiness. Just layer in that together with awareness of the breath. Those therefore. In-breath compassion. Therefore, may I take their suffering. Out-breath love. Therefore, may I give happiness. Again and again. May I take their suffering. May I give my happiness. Just explore letting those ideas ride on your awareness of the breath. May I take their suffering, breathing in. May I give my happiness, breathing out. Just an attitude, an exploration. And as you do this, allow yourself to notice any resistance or block. And acknowledge that that resistance or block is the self-cherishing attitude that seems to protect you, but actually suffocates and blocks your good heart. So imagine that self-cherishing is like a hard shell covering your heart. And that as you breathe in and you take suffering, you give it to that attitude, weakening it. And as you breathe out, the love and compassion and happiness are able to escape through the cracks. And so breathe in black smoke, the suffering of yourself and all sentient beings, breathing it in. It forms a thunder cloud, and lightning strikes, cracking that hard shell of self-cherishing. And warm golden light of your good heart, of loving kindness, is able to come through. And so you breathe out golden light, loving kindness, happiness, the causes of happiness, to all sentient beings. And so breathing in compassion, breathing in suffering, give it to the self-cherishing thought. Breathing out, connecting with love, giving out happiness, the causes in happiness, in the form of golden light. So add those layers. In black smoke, out golden light. In suffering, out happiness. In compassion, out love. Riding on the breath, these ideas. Each cycle, weakening self-cherishing, strengthening cherishing others. Really think that that black smoke is suffering and the causes of suffering of all sentient beings. And really think it forms that cloud around your heart from which lightning strikes and cracks through that shell of self-cherishing. And really think as you breathe out, loving kindness thoughts that carry with it happiness and the causes of happiness in the form of golden light to all living beings.
Allowing your breath to be in its natural pace. Emphasizing whatever you're comfortable emphasizing. Allow these ideas to ride on the breath. Each cycle of breath, weakening self-cherishing, strengthening cherishing others. And do this for a few more breaths, feeling like these final breaths of the practice finish destroying that hard shell and finish releasing that good heart. Until there is no black smoke, there is only golden light. And it fills you even as it radiates out. This suffering in my life came from the self-cherishing thought. Happiness in my life came from cherishing others. May I keep this knowledge with me. And through this practice, may we develop cherishing others to its utmost extent, bodhicitta, and eventually Buddhahood for the benefit of all living beings. Okay, so you can relax your attention. How did it go? That was just a short one, but the gradual layering sometimes can be really effective, or you can use just one layer that feels resonant. So if visualization makes it too complicated, you can leave it aside. If you like to stay with concepts simply, you can keep with that. But it's kind of like as soon as you get familiar with one layer, it's easy to get bored or distracted. And so to prevent that, then you can layer in more depth of the same ideas. So it's the same ideas in all the layers. It's just more and more depth and elaboration with them. Did you get stuck in any spots or have any interesting ideas with any of it? How did it go? In the meditations that I've been part of, sorry, I'm just going to jump in. I'd never heard that you run out of black smoke or taking in the external suffering. That was a very interesting aspect that you had shared.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to finish it. There's a lot of different ways to do Tonglen. Yeah, there's quite a few variations of the same ideas, and
a few variations on how to finish it. Some say just kind of then rest your attention and keep those ideas. Some people say wrap it up, and carry the sense of responsibility for sentient beings, but let go of the heaviness of the suffering. So it really varies. And I guess in terms of your own practice, really sit with what's going to be the most effective way for me to finish a meditation that will keep me focused on the needs of sentient beings without being swallowed up by the distress that I see, and what's going to help me keep giving my happiness and warmth and love to others without letting me fall into the traps of being like the hero or something. What's the kind of best way to wrap it? Is it to keep awareness of both happiness and suffering? Or is it to kind of emphasize one over the other? And it might vary day by day. But it's a little bit like if you've ever been trying to work through an issue with someone and they keep going to, yes, 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 but just listen to me. And they don't want to hear problem solving, right? Have you ever done that where someone's coming to you for advice and they're like, I don't want to hear advice. I just want you to listen to me. I just want you to hug me and comfort me and validate me and tell me everything's okay. Stop giving me advice, right? But then a different friend might say, can you give me some advice? Right? I don't need you to validate me and be affectionate towards me and mirror me. I want you to tell me, how can I move on from this? Or what are some ways I can transform through this? Yeah, how it can go either way, right? And how we are with people and how we are with the Dharma can be that way too, where you have to keep that flexibility of, is what is needed here mirroring, just straight, here is what's happening? Or do we need to look into idealization or look into the future of what is possible and hold that? Because different things are going to help different days. Yeah. So some days looking at suffering and looking at happiness. Some days looking just at suffering. Some days looking just at happiness. Yeah. Yeah. Leo, go ahead.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah, it's like for me it was very difficult this practice right now. I don't know. I think my mind is a little bit foggy maybe, but I couldn't stop thinking about my daughter. Okay, she's going through one of those like phases. She's 8, and the part about giving love, I did. I felt filled, and then I could do it. Like it was easier. But the part about taking
Mm.
her suffering, that was just so difficult for me right now, because I feel like I've been talking to her for a while now, and then it feels that she she just doesn't listen, and that was that thing that blocked me from taking her suffering. Like I felt that I just can't take her suffering, because I don't know, maybe she's choosing to suffer. I don't know. I just, that was so difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a classic tale. I'm sure no parents here relate to that whatsoever. No. But I think that what we have to remember is that it's the attitude shift. It's that when you meet suffering with resistance, it makes suffering worse. And self-cherishing gives you resistance to bearing witness to someone else's pain. And so then it's already worse than it was to begin with. When you're going in, you're like ready to embrace the suffering of whatever is going on. There's a flexibility and a lack of tension. But when you go in with I don't know how many times I've told you, I don't know how many times I've explained this, I don't know what more I can offer you, you already have all of this resistance and resentment, which actually makes your own suffering worse and then makes you less effective to them. So it's not about finding like a problem solving method of how can I actually end their suffering. It's starting with the attitude shift that's not resisting. Yeah. When you make something voluntary, it feels completely different. So what if you were to say, this is my specific practice that I am choosing on purpose to meet her suffering and to experience or to experiment with different mindsets. not about different problem solving mechanisms I can do to get her to solve her issues. That might come, it might not come, they might just have to grow out of it, you know, life is complicated. But the start with, what is the attitude shift I can do? How about I decide this is not a block to my path or a challenge in my life? What if I were to decide this is exactly what I need? This is
Yeah,
exactly
and
right now.
yeah, and I think like at this point, this practice showed me that I'm really at this spot right now because I'm not being able to see it from a different perspective. Like I said, I think my mind is kind of foggy. I just can't see clearly, you know,
Yeah.
because normally I do Tonglen and then it's perfect. It's just very nice practice. But like right now, this just showed me that at this point in my life, I can't see it yet. You know, like I'm in this position, yeah. And I think I may have to accept that, like to be gentle with myself because it's been difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You intellectually understand, but that doesn't mean the practice is going to catch up immediately. Yeah, emotions take longer to process. Yeah. Yeah, Pranav and then Eve.
Yeah, hi, Venerable. Uh, I didn't have to uh, force a visualization today. So that way it was kind of very natural. So yeah,
Oh, that's good.
so
Yeah, that's interesting. Why do you think that is?
uh, I don't know.
Just more calm today, or just kind of more just relaxed with it, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. So last few days were hectic. My dad was not feeling well, so he was hospitalized for like 2, 3 weeks, and we were all worried.
Yeah,
No, maybe I'm seeing more clearly now. I don't know. But
yeah. Well, I'm glad it's one of these practices that can really make you so much more present for other people's suffering, you know, because our first reaction to other people's suffering is either to dive in and try and fix it or to run away because it's too hard. And whether we're standing there in the room or not, standing there in the room, you can be mentally being like, what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? Or mentally checked out because it's too hard, you know? And if you can be doing Tonglen, immediately you're relaxed in the moment and you can bear witness to their suffering without making it about you, you know. And then you can really lean into the very obvious things like, oh, they need one more pillow, you know, or oh, they need some space right now, or actually they might love a song right now, you know. And you can be problem solving, but from a much more creative, relaxed, present place, or just kind of let go into ambiguity, but it feels completely different because you've made it voluntary. So your heart is ready to hold whatever life is happening. Yeah, so just very gently. Yeah. Yeah, Eve, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Venerable. This was actually the first time that I've done a guided Tonglen like this. It was beautiful, wonderful. Thank you so much. But I think it highlighted a mistake that I think I'm making. I'd love to get your feedback. And that is, you know, that you kind of go through this cycle when you're doing this practice of taking in the suffering with compassion and then giving love to increase someone else's happiness. And I found myself initially doing that and kind of getting myself into this position where I have to be a void or I have to be an absence or a vacuum or something like that. Like somehow I didn't matter in there. And then you said something about, well, you'll be there with your loving heart. And I realized it's not really about becoming a void. It's about, you know, being that loving heart.
Yeah.
And that that's a pretty wonderful place to be. So
Yeah.
So
It's interesting to bring up because we can mix together the teachings on relative truth and the teachings on ultimate truth, or the strategies of method and the strategies of wisdom, and we can mix them before we've kind of gotten them clear enough separately first. And, you know, this is a practice of method. This is a practice related to relative truth. And Relative truth needs the warmest heart we can possibly bring to it, so that when we meditate on ultimate truth, it doesn't become cold and stark and overly intellectual. And we need, the wisdom of ultimate truth to be able to understand dependent arising and the way in which suffering came about to begin with. And, these things become mutually reinforcing. But in the beginning, really stay with what is relevant and immediate to your life and gain stability and warmth in that place. And then you can be layering in more and more of the teachings on ultimate truth to that. But it's a common thing to happen, so it makes sense. I'm glad that you brought it up.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, other Tonglen thoughts, Tonglen questions? There's for those of you that like 9-round breathing, there's also a Tonglen method that has alternating nostrils, and that one is found in An Offering Cloud of Nectar by His Eminence Choden Rinpoche, and that one's really very sweet. Roshi Joan Halifax has a very good one that's got really powerful imagery. Of course, Venerable Pema Chodron, and in the classic text, How to Meditate by Kathleen MacDonald, Sangye Kadro has a beautiful one. So there's lots and lots that you can find quite quickly. So if you Google Tonglen, you'll find more resources than you probably could ever ask for. But it's important to know that the point of it is to get rid of self-cherishing and to increase cherishing others. Yeah. And in so doing, you feel a greater sense of well-being and a deeper connection to sentient beings. And so to get over self-cherishing or to want to destroy self-cherishing, you need to know what self-cherishing is. Otherwise, it becomes a weapon of self-harm. So keep remembering that self-cherishing is excessive self-interest. It's excessive self-interest at the expense of others or with indifference to others. It's not self-care. Self-care is fine. But some of the things we call self-care can actually fall under the heading of self-cherishing behaviors. Because if you think, oh, I'm just having a day for me, you can do it in a way that's healthy and good, or in a way that's very reactionary and obnoxious. And if someone knocks on your door, you like yell at the poor delivery man who's like bringing the food that you ordered, right? But you're having a me day and now everyone is annoying. Yeah, this can happen to us. So it's really understanding what is self-cherishing like and why is it harmful. And the whole text really is helping us see this is what happens when you allow self-cherishing. This is what happens when you become the crow, not the peacock. This is what happens. Look at karma again and again. This is the wheel of sharp weapons returning. This very suffering you don't want came from your self-cherishing thought. Give it back to your self-cherishing thought. Don't take it out on others and make more of the same. It's seemingly simple, but in our daily life is not so simple. So then we get into, so this is what the Tonglen practice looks like in brief. So just to review it, you connect with giving on the out breath, visualize golden light, with loving kindness, offer past, present, and future happiness. Connect with taking on the in breath, visualize black smoke, and with compassion, take past, present, and future suffering. So that's the summary of that whole practice. And it's good to do the first 4 steps. Sometimes they can be separate sessions, but just to kind of clarify yourself or give a frame for what you're doing Tonglen for, so it kind of informs that heart practice. Any questions there before we move on? Yeah, Eve, did you have one, or your hand is still up? No, that's all right. That's all right. Emojis. Yeah. Yeah, no worries. Okay, so let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll go into another round of things, and I'll just leave that up on the screen for you guys to look at during the break if you're curious. So see you in 5 minutes. All right, start to come back. Okay. All right, looks like we're mostly back. I'll just wait a minute in case people are in the kitchen or in the loo or wherever. Can show you another tour. Look, here is the door. Here are the free books. But here's this beautiful portrait of Lama Zopa. Can you guys see it? It's so beautiful. It's like we're almost all back. What else should I show you? I don't know. There's the altar that's getting refinished. There is a chair that His Holiness sat on when he visited. And a map of the FPMT centers.
Is this a classroom, Venerable?
No, this is the tiny FPMT Gompa that's upstairs. If you've been to Maitripa College before, it was Roger's old office, and we've made it into a tiny Gompa. We have our big Gompa downstairs. Here's our tiny one, and then the rest of the offices are staff, and then in the middle is the big library that I walked through earlier. So yes, if you are ever in Portland, come and say hi to us. Okay, looks like we're pretty much back. Okay, so we're going to go into more Wheel of Sharp Weapons verses. Many of them have this phrase. So I've just pulled out a few key ones. Okay, so when all who are close turn against us as enemies, this is the Wheel of Sharp Weapons returning, full circle upon us from wrongs we have done. Till now, we've held grudges inside us with anger, with thoughts of sly methods to cause others pain. Hereafter, let's try to have less affectation, nor pretend to be kind while we harbor base aims. So the beginning is when all who are close turn against us as enemies, okay? So this doesn't happen that often, but it can be simple moments where your friend group is hanging out and you're talking about politics or whatever, and suddenly they all take offense at what you said and totally misunderstand you, and you actually meant nothing ill by it, and you're just thoroughly misunderstood. Yes, and now they're all really turning against you, and you're like, oh my God, you guys didn't even understand what I meant. Yeah, or you're having family dinner and you say something offhand, it was totally benign, but it lands in a way that is not at all what you meant. So these kind of speech misfires where from your side you actually didn't mean any harm. It wasn't a case where you were trying to put someone in their place. It wasn't a case where you were trying to be deceptive. There was actually nothing wrong with what you said. Sometimes when that happens, you feel completely bewildered. You think, why? Why did they misunderstand me? I only meant this, but they heard that. And this is the Wheel of Sharp Weapons returning. You weren't always so kind. You weren't always so benevolent. And even in this life, you're not always that way all the time. This is the Wheel of Sharp Weapons returning. And so rather than getting reactive and trying to justify and try and explain, you know that that doesn't usually work in the moment anyway. You have to just kind of pull back and let the dust settle. Later, you might do some repair methods or some nonviolent communication methods or whatever makes sense. But mentally, how do you sit with that? Mentally, you know, it's becomes a really interesting question of thinking, I was the one who was deceptive. That's why now I'm the one who's misunderstood. How was I deceptive in the past? There are remembered ways, but there's unremembered ways. And so you think, all right, well, this is from holding grudges with anger and having sly methods, being sneaky in ways of causing others pain, you know, talking behind their back or saying passive aggressive little barbs or whatever it is. And you think, well, whatever it is hereafter, Hereafter, let's try to have less affectation, nor pretend to be kind while we harbor base aims. So get rid of pretense. It doesn't mean don't be kind. It doesn't mean don't have affection or anything. It means don't have an affect of some sort of feeling that is not what you're feeling. And it's a little bit like what we talked about last time. I'm reminded of like Anna's comment last time. It's like pretense doesn't work. Facade doesn't help. But then what do you do if you're feeling really grumpy or unsettled or annoyed? You don't want to leak that out on people, but you also don't want to have a pretense of friendly when friendly is not what you're feeling. So it's like, how do you maintain civility and politeness without overdoing it and getting sugar-coated? Yeah, because that sugar coat will be felt. It's, sugar covering caca, right? The smell will leak through. Yeah, and it'll be even grosser because of the sugar. Yeah, so it's something like that. It's something about really managing our tendencies to put up the facade as a defense because we don't want people to see where we are or how we're feeling. And you don't want to go so far the other way and become indulgent and be like, I'm grumpy today, everybody better stay out of my way, blah, blah, blah. But I think that's less common for us as adults, particularly as deep thinking, introspective adults. We're not as likely to leak our crap on people as we are to pretend it's not there. So pretense does us nothing. How does this one land with you? Yeah, when people misunderstand you, to look at your own habits of pretense and to cut them out? Does it have some resonance? What comes up for you? I'll put it back on the screen, but jump in when you have thoughts. It's a lot there. Yeah, there's a lot there. So, just let it sit. You don't have to take it on board if it's not useful, but the ones of this genre in this section of the text are quite provocative and quite confronting. Another one is when sleep overwhelms us while practicing virtue. This is the wheel of sharp weapons returning full circle upon us from wrongs we have done. Till now, we have gathered the causes for obstacles hindering our practice of virtuous acts. Hereafter, for the sake of our practice of Dharma, let's gladly endure all the hardships we meet. So the parentheses, it says, we've lacked all respect for the scriptural teachings. We have sat on our books and left texts on the ground. We have looked down upon those with deep insight. Basically, we've minimized the spiritual path, and now we're not able to focus on it when we want to. Yeah. So in some way, you've had a disrespectful attitude towards the spiritual path and the supports for the spiritual path, like texts and such. And the result of that is now you really want to practice, you want to understand things well, but you can't focus. And maybe this happens to you with some topics more than others. Have you had this, especially if you have the same teacher teaching many different topics? So it's not the teacher and you's relationship. You like this teacher, works fine. But some topics you just vague out and you cannot stop yourself from vaguing out. And you've had a perfectly good night's sleep and you just kind of like start nodding off. And you're like, come on, wake up. This is interesting. You need to know this. This is the teaching you keep wanting to hear. And now you can't even focus. Come on. Yeah, if you ever get that one. So either the drift, disassociation, vague out, but you don't want to, or you fall asleep and you can't stop yourself. It's really interesting to think of this as the wheel of sharp weapons returning, because usually we're like, oh, it's obviously just too warm in here, or obviously I had too many starches and now it's making me sleepy, or now I've, whatever external things, which of course play a part. It's not like they don't play a part. But when everything comes together and you're on a roll with the teaching, you can bear so much and still stay focused. And I'm sure we have experiences of that where we've really been in the flow with the teaching And you might get too hot, you might have a mosquito bite, you might hear a crash in the other room from your cat knocking over plates. It could, any number of things could happen, but you stay focused because you're in that. Yeah, so remember that when things come together, those very same physical things you might blame don't actually apply. Yeah, so it's not like they don't have an impact, but don't give them all the credit. This is the wheel of sharp weapons returning. Yeah, so sleep's an interesting one, and all of the ones of this genre are quite confronting, but it's also interesting to look at. This verse is hundreds of years old. We're not that different than people hundreds of years ago. Yeah. And then when all our affairs, both religious and worldly, run into trouble and fall into ruin, this is the wheel of sharp weapons returning, full circle upon us from wrongs we have done. Till now we felt cause and effect could be slighted. Hereafter let's practice with patience and strength. So the footnote from Geshe Nawan Darge is cause and effect describes the universal law of karma, whereby virtuous actions result in happiness, non-virtuous actions result in suffering. So it's like when things just don't come together or they keep falling apart, even though you're organized, even though you have all of the bits and pieces together, they just won't work. This is kind of a direct result of having ignored the law of cause and effect. So that's something interesting to sit with. And so that means we have to do a karma pivot. Otherwise, people will get confused, right? So karma is not destiny, remember, right? Karma is not destiny. Karma is not fate. Karma is not fate. Karma is not predestination, okay? Karma is not punishment or retribution or reward. Karma is not describing any of these concepts, okay? Karma is not personified. There's no Zeus sending down thunderbolts, right? It's not personified, although it is personal. Okay? So it's action and the consequences of action. And it's extremely hidden phenomena. So just keep remembering that about karma. It's extremely hidden phenomena, as opposed to manifest phenomena like the water in my glass that appears to my eye primary consciousness observing it in front of me. That is obvious. Karma is not obvious. It's not hidden phenomena like the emptiness of an inherently existent self that appears to the mental consciousness of an Arya Bodhisattva in single-pointed meditation on emptiness, right? That's hidden, but not extremely hidden. So at our level, we need to rely on our observations of the natural world, how we see cause and effect play out, and our reliance on the Buddha as being a valid being, and therefore his teachings on karma are non-deceptive. So when we look at this, the Buddha being a valid being, okay, the valid being, how is the Buddha a valid being? How do you guys hear that? What does that mean to you? In order to believe karma, we need to establish the source of the teachings on karma as being a valid source. How on earth do we prove the Buddha was a valid source to pay attention to and trust? That's not just blind faith. Remember? Some of you haven't heard this teaching before, but some of you have. How do you prove that the Buddha is a valid being? At least enough to take the law of cause and effect as like your working theory. How do you come to some conviction that he's not BSing us?
I guess we just integrate in our daily life his teachings and all, and then we see from our own perspectives, and then we just check if it's real or not.
Yeah.
So it's kind of validating.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You test what can be tested immediately, right? Some of the things are going to take a long time to prove experientially, but some things don't. Some things actually you can prove experientially quite quickly. So do those things, practice those things that the Buddha taught that have
enough common sense to them for you to say, sure, I'll take it on faith that that's a good idea because it makes enough sense to my common sense, makes enough sense to my inner wisdom to try, and I don't see any consequence to giving it a go. So let's meditate on patience as an antidote to anger, for example, and see if the rest of my day goes better. Something simple and straightforward. So you read a little on patience, think a little on patience, meditate a little on patience, and then see that you're more patient. Ha, the Buddha. All right, what else? And you do a few of these, right? And this starts to build faith-based in reason, faith-based in experience, that makes you say those things like karma, I can leave an ambiguity, but I can have a sense of trust that, you know, still needs to be verified, still needs to be proved through experience, maybe, but makes enough sense to live by. And the other way you do this is to also think, what is the consequence of living in accordance with a teaching like this? Is there anything bad that would happen if I thought positive, constructive actions lead to happiness and negative, destructive actions lead to suffering, and therefore I should practice ethics? Is there any downside besides to your ego, right? Besides to your, you know, habits of hedonism? Like, is there any downside in living that way? You know, so whether or not the Buddha is right or not, what he's inviting us to do is to practice ethics. Does that have any problematic things for you? You know, so you sit with that. All right, so when we say ethics, we just mean the ethics of non-harmfulness. Is living in a way that's non-harmful going to benefit you whether you're Buddhist or not, whether you believe in karma or not? Right, so you do those two, right? You do the, I can trust the teacher on the teachings I can't validate yet because I've tried the ones I can. So he's a valid being for me because I've developed trust based on my own experience. And if I practice this thing that's extremely hidden phenomena, there isn't an immediate negative consequence in my life in doing so. There's no harm in it. And there actually might be incredible benefit. How does that sit with you? Do you feel anything kind of problematic or curious about that? You believe in karma because the Buddha is a valid being. You can prove that the Buddha is a valid being through your own experience. Does that sit okay? Yeah. Yes, Nay, go ahead.
I think, everything makes sense. I think the only time where I have a bit of conflict is, in the workplace. Like I remember when I was working, you see people who behave unethically and they do well, and then you think, but I'm not gossiping and I'm not taking credit for someone's work and I'm not, sucking up to my boss and pretending I like playing golf or whatever. So then you kind of see how bad behavior actually ends up with better bonuses and promotions. And then it's like, then you have to make a personal choice. Do I want to be that who do I want to be? And what am I willing to do to make, or, change
Absolutely.
industries? Yeah.
Absolutely. There's that course Venerable Rabina used to run all the time. Why do bad things happen to good people? I don't know if she still runs that one. You should ask her to run it again at Shantideva. It's a good one. But it kind of boils down to there is no such thing as instant karma. John Lennon and Yoko Ono had it wrong. Right? Instant karma is not going to get you. Neither is instant karma going to benefit you. There is lag time. And that is so important for us to understand with the mechanisms of karma, is that what is happening now is not about now. What is happening now is planting the seeds for your future. What is happening now is the result of the past. And so those people getting all of those rewards are reaping the benefits of their past self. And what they're creating is a lot of hardship for their future. Yeah. And the hardships they're creating for their future are quite poignant because right now those behaviors are getting reinforced by a pleasant experience. And so while karma is extremely hidden phenomena, there's some facts about it that the Buddha explained that can help us get our head around how to make it work for us in a way that facilitates our spiritual path
and also helps us move from happiness to complete enlightenment. So that we're looking at not just the wheel of sharp weapons returning, but, the wheel of flower petals raining upon us, right? That, we want to be able to look at it in both ways and to be able to experience in it both ways, so that when bad stuff happens, we can use it, but also we can encourage and plant more seeds for happiness in the future. So I think, when we look at these things of karma, this is from the Lamrim, lots of you know this one. Maybe we will come back to this if there's time, but I think what's most important is here. So the results of karma are, there's the ripening result, the body and mind will take in a future life, but it's this causally concordant result that is really interesting. So this has two parts, right? There's the experience that will experience a situation similar to the ones our actions caused others to experience, the wheel of sharp weapons returning. There's also the behavioral result, is that we'll tend to do that action again in the future. We'll have the habit of it. And in a way, this one's more dangerous, the habit to do it again. So for something like, a slimy businessman manipulating the boss, right? Slimy businessman, manipulating the boss might be exhausting their good karma, right? And then what they're creating is negative karma to be deceived. But also they have the habit that is fine with deception. Both. So they'll both be deceived and have a tendency to continue to deceive in the future. But if when we have hardship, see it as the wheel of sharp weapons returning, we're undermining that fundamentally. And that is so powerful for the rest of this life, let alone future lives. So changing that causally concordant behavioral effect, that one is so tricky, because it's so easy if someone punches us to want to punch them, even though none of us are actively involved with physical violence that much in our lives probably, but you know what I mean. Yeah, they punch me, I'll punch them. It's just sort of this natural thing. What if you think, oh, they punch me and I think this is the wheel of sharp weapons returning, hereafter I'm going to stop punching people. Okay. So that punch means that has exhausted itself. And this time I'm going to meet that experience with assertiveness and creativity and better boundaries and consequences that are not retaliation, consequences that are not punishment, simple consequences that prevent further harm to myself and others. But I'm not going to weaponize being a victim, nor am I going to become a perpetrator. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. You have a follow-up?
I know, I was just thinking, this is such a good reminder, the wheel of sharp weapons returning on me, because I think I somehow was more focused on just, understanding that karma perpetuates habit patterns, but also, so helpful to be reminded that whatever happens is because really, it was my behavior in the past. And like you said, I need to do both, not react in a crazy way, in a harmful way, and also understand I need to change my behavior. So important, change my behavior.
Yeah, that piece. Yeah, that's the tricky piece. And doing it in ways that then you don't become a doormat, or you don't become kind of like depressed, or that's the skillful means piece of all of this. Like, what is the skillful means application then? That's very, very common sense, very trusting your own wisdom, but is letting go of those tendencies to be reactive. Yeah, so tricky. Yeah, other karma thoughts. Karma thoughts? Wheel of sharp weapons returning? Yeah, go ahead, Sheila.
I just am one shock when I think of that, of my past actions, that, I always think like, well, I'm a nice person, but then these really horrible things, and you realize that somewhere in the past that you contributed. It's very hard to own.
Yeah, it is. It is hard to own, and it's it's hard to own, but it's also so useful to ask, are there any little whispers of that tendency still in me? Like there's a coarse form that you're experiencing,
and you're not doing anything close to that coarse form that you're experiencing, say someone's being really horrible and gossipy and divisive and really speaking terribly horrible lies about you behind your back, and you would never do that. You truly would never do that. But there might be a little whisper of that somewhere, where if a friend of yours meets someone you don't like and they look back at you and are like, how about this guy? You kind of roll your eyes and are like, yeah, right? How about that guy? And it's a quiet moment that encourages divisiveness.
Mhm.
You know, the little whispers of that remain. And so these wheels of sharp weapons returning, you don't have to feel like you're a bad person. You're not a bad person, but we all do things that are on the spectrum of the thing we're experiencing, probably. And every once in a while, not at all, not even a little bit. You know, we don't want to get into any of that victim blaming or anything like that, because people are still responsible for perpetuating non-virtue. And you know, it's just that they would do it to someone else, not you, if you hadn't created the cause for it. You know, it's not like they're suddenly going to be an angel. It would just land somewhere else.
Mhm.
So yeah, looking at the like, what's the whisper of that tendency that I still might do, that can be a useful tool for introspection.
Mhm.
You know, just kind of asking those things. You know, you can also use it as a way of, I guess, feeling more in tune with the universal human condition of this is what happens to us when we do these things, rather than this is what happens to me. You know, that's useful. This is what happens to me when I do these things. But if you universalize, it can help you feel that deep connection and resonance with the human experience. And so when you see other people having their wheel of sharp weapons return, there can be that immediate kind of softening and empathy and affinity that makes compassion flow so easily. Yeah, Mary, go ahead.
I was just wondering, we've been talking about, you know, like emotional behavioral things coming back to you, but what if you have physical ailments in your body? Is that also the wheel of sharp weapons coming back?
Sure is. Yeah, sure is. That's a tricky one too. Yeah. You know, most things that are life-threatening are the result of having taken life. But there's a few. I'm just scrolling through. I saw there was one about gout. The other, I was just looking at it, was really interesting, and I almost put it in the slides and then I decided not to. But if you read through the root verses, you'll come across a couple that are specifically about physical ailments. Let's see. And also things about like daily consumption. There's one that says, when the things we require for daily consumption and use fall apart or wasted or spoiled. This is from basically being careless or stealing other people's possessions. So yeah, have a little read through. It can be quite, you know, it can be tricky, but here's the gout one. It's verse 26. Let's see what it looks like here. It says, when we suffer from sickness and such interference, especially when gout has swollen our legs, this is the wheel of sharp weapons returning full circle upon us from wrongs we have done. Till now, without shame and with no self-control, we have stolen or misused what others have given. Hereafter, let's never take anything offered to the three jewels of refuge as if it were ours. And then there's strokes, and then there's the minds getting clouded, and et cetera, et cetera. So really feel like you inherited it from your past self. Yeah, and that who knows what your past self got up to. We got up to all sorts of nonsense. You know, don't overly identify with it. Just think, okay, so this can be fuel for my path, and also I don't really want to experience this again. So how do I make sure I'm not creating future causes of the same? You know? Yeah. And, you know, really don't ever feel like it's your fault, because every action was done dependently, positive and negative. You know, so when we look at these negative results, they dependently arose, just like our positive actions dependently arose. So that's why there's also no reason for pride. Like, you can't really take ownership of the good things you did either. You can just be happy they happened. Any good that you do was learned and was context specific and was supported by this and supported by that, and it came together, and that's wonderful. But thinking, I did it all by myself is the pride of a child, and we need to cut that out. You know, just like, oh, this terrible thing, this terrible thing, this terrible thing, I am bad. It's too simple. You didn't do it all by yourself either. You just have to wear it. Yeah, it's your responsibility, but it's not your fault. Yeah. So feeling that division is really important on the spiritual path of being able to take responsibility for whatever's arising without identifying with it, without attributing fault or blame. Yeah, because that's not at all what's useful or true, you know? Yeah, but I think it can be a lot more empowering than to think things happen randomly. Yeah, things happening randomly is a bit scarier than thinking I created the cause for this, or thinking that some divine creator is sending us this terrible suffering for some reason, for some lesson, for some punishment, for some teaching. It can be useful to think in those ways for people that have an affinity for those types of religions, but it can also be just as empowering to think, it was me some lifetime ago and I made this, and now I'm reaping that, you know? So whatever kind of worldview is going to help you anchor into ethics and anchor into compassion, then that's the religion or spiritual tradition for you. Yeah, what's going to support those things. Yeah. Any final thoughts or questions before we call it a night? No, I think we've got one more session. Is that right, Sheila? So our last session is going to be all the ultimate truth emptiness verses of the text, which are quite interesting. And there's some really beautiful poetry in there as well. So if you're scrolling through the verses, they're the ones towards the end. So that's what we'll talk about in our last session. And thank you very much, everyone. And I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Venerable Yönten. Thank you, everybody. See you all next week.
Thank you, Venerable Yönten. Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Janchu Sencho Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panang Ke Gyuchi, Ke Pan Yampa Me Pa Yang, Gone Gondu Pelwa Sho, Toni Dawa Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panang Ke Gyuchi, Ke Pan Yampa Me Pa Yang, Gone Gondu Pelwa Sho. All right, good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.